Hi, my name is Caroline, and I am a studio instructor here at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Today I'm going to share with you two new fun techniques that you can use using watercolor at home. These two techniques are called lifting and using salt with watercolor to create some really cool, interesting textures. Let's go ahead and get started. This is my watercolor paper and watercolor. I am going to start with the lifting technique. So I'm going to get my brush, load up my pigment with any color of my choice, and you can have fun with this. You are basically just going to create an area. Could be big, could be small. You could use the wet on wet technique or wet on dry. I'm sort of doing a combination of both at the moment. Started with wet on dry, now moving towards wet on wet. And this can have one color, and can have multiple colors, but what we're gonna do is we are actually going to lift up some of this pigment from the paper, but we have to put some pigment down on the paper to actually lift. I love how blues and purples work together, like so. Now, one trick you really wanna know with this technique is you want plenty of pigment and color on here. Okay. Really filling up this space, having fun with my colors, experimenting. What do they look like? How do they move? And then, now that I've filled my space, I'm going to lay down a variety of absorbent materials. Now here in front of me, I just have some ripped up paper towels and tissue papers. You can also do this with yarn. You can do this with like a paper doily. You can do this technique with anything that will absorb my watercolor pigment. So as I'm doing this, I'm just very carefully pressing it down. You don't have to press it down if you don't want to. You can try different shapes. And what's gonna happen is we are gonna let this area dry completely. And then we are going to lift up these paper things. So our paper towels, the tissue, and we're gonna see the texture that it creates. Now this is really fun if you're doing like clouds or a landscape, to make some fun, interesting texture. Make some fun, interesting texture in your landscape painting. So we're gonna let that dry and all of the magic will happen. Now on the other side, we are going to create another fun texture. Oh, my brush isn't too clean. You can see that on here, that's okay. I'll probably use some blue again. And I am just filling this up so I can do wet on wet. I think I'll probably do mainly some blue here. And again, you can do this on a small section or a big section. Very blue. And once you have your pigment down, you are going to look in your cabinet and see what kind of salt can you find. This is just kitchen salt that you can use in cooking and baking. And then you are going to sprinkle it onto the area that you want some cool texture. And what happens is the salt actually absorbs and pulls in the pigment. So we're also gonna let this dry. Now it's really fun if you want to experiment with different sizes of salt. If you use the thick, big salt, it will have a different effect than this very fine salt. Also, it matters how much salt do you put on, a lot or a little. This is great for sand texture or even grass, maybe some wood. But you're gonna let this dry completely, and then over a trash can, you're gonna rub it off to really reveal the beautiful texture that it creates. Now it's a little too soon to peel these off, but I will show a little bit. Now it's thinking about using it a little bit as an eraser. You can already see that the magic is happening like that. It's much lighter here than next to it. But an awesome piece in the VMFA's collection to look at for some inspiration is titled The Fairy Ring. Now this piece is a watercolor landscape by artist Dugald Walker, and it is a beautiful, fun, whimsical painting that I want you to investigate and see if you could use any of these texture techniques to create something like that for yourself. So let these dry, then you can sort of brush away your salt and peel back whatever you have laid down to absorb and lift up your texture, like so. The longer you let your lifting substances stay and absorb, the more extreme of results you will get. I hope you have fun experimenting with lifting and salt techniques at your house. Thanks for joining me.